Football's back.
It sure is, and it is time to continue our NFL Four Wide feature. This time we head up to the Steel City, and the Steelers, Four Wide with the Wise Guys. Michael Bean joining us, blogs on the Steelers for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Hey, Michael, let's talk first, go back, if we may, and I know this could be a bit painful, to the Super Bowl where the Steelers lost to the Packers. What areas were kind of magnified, if you will, for the Steelers during that game, and what have they done, do you feel, very well in terms of plugging up holes and improving for this season as they try to make another run back to the Super Bowl?
Well, it was number one ranked defense all year. Obviously, there were some holes in the secondary,
yeah.
But, people only seem to remember what happened last, and of course, Aaron Rodgers shredded the Steelers secondary. But Brian McFadden was hurt, Troy Polamalu was hurt. Hopefully, they'll both be healthy this year, and then at least 9 of 11 starters are returning on defense. So they really didn't do too much in terms of changing up the core personnel to get a little bit deeper in the defensive backfield. And, they're going to need to count on a couple young guys to emerge as good nickel backs. But really, this is the same group of guys, and they're going to be special again.
And also, too, you've got two guys, Troy Polamalu, who's now been tagged as a franchise player, Mike Wallace, both not being offered contract extensions for now. The Steelers a bit generous, if you will, during the offseason, and rightly so. You signed up some key players, but Polamalu is Pittsburgh, if you will. And do you think that'll have any impact on both Polamalu and Wallace when they become free agents? In other words, will Pittsburgh still have first shot in their minds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Polamalu, it's just a matter of cash flow. I don't think there's any question that they're still very interested in locking him up long term. It's of course not a great proposition for Troy because he's not young, and he obviously plays a brand of football that's conducive to injury. So he could conceivably play himself out of that long term contract. But I think when it's all said and done, they're going to certainly extend him for another 4 or 5 years. It'll be big bucks, just like you said. He's kind of the face of the franchise in a way right now. So. But, with Mike Wallace, I was a little surprised they didn't try and lock him up. Another monster year this season, and he's going to be very, very expensive. But there's only so much money to go around, and they wanted to make sure they stayed young and fast and good on defense with all these other older guys set to retire pretty soon. So I think that was their top priority.
Yeah, you look through it recently. You got Santonio Holmes and Plaxico Burress, former Steeler receivers. Man, you don't want to cut loose Mike Wallace, who's really come on here in the last couple of years. As we're joined by Michael Bean, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. He blogs on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Our NFL Four Wide feature continues.
Hey, Michael, I wanted to ask you about the schedule. Of course, they open at Baltimore, always a heavyweight fight. Somebody's bound to get injured in that game just because it's just such a crazy, dirty game. But I'm looking at the schedule. You got an early test at Indianapolis week 3. Another potential pitfall there at New England, and that's week 8. But I'm looking down at the very tail end of the schedule. You got Cincinnati, Cleveland, San Francisco, St. Louis, and Cleveland again. It looks like for the home stretch that it's going to be pretty smooth sailing probably for the Steelers if everybody stays healthy. What's your initial perception of the schedule? How do you think it's going to play out?
Well, you said it. It's a little tough out of the gates, but they can certainly hit their stride down that stretch. There's nobody down the stretch that should scare the Steelers. Obviously, you want to be playing your best football in December and January. But one little weird oddity of the schedule is you'll notice all 4 of those AFC South games, I believe, are consecutive weeks, which is pretty strange. And Tennessee shouldn't be that great, but it's kind of a rivalry game. Those defenses will be hitting hard, and then Houston, of course, will be dangerous. That'll be a nice test for the Steelers secondary. But if they can just kind of keep their head above water for the first 8 weeks, 5-3, 4-4 even, I think they're going to get hot down the stretch and rip off 7 or 8 in a row.
Our NFL Four Wide feature features the Pittsburgh Steelers today. Michael Bean blogs on the Steelers for BehindTheCurtain.com. It's a really good read. Check it out when you got some time. And let me ask you this finally, Michael. Obviously, speaking of rivalries, there's a big rivalry, of course, with the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. And, of course, maybe that goes back to the Pittsburgh-Cleveland days, if you will, back in the 70s and 80s. I thought that was one of the great rivalries going in the NFL at the time. Two-part question quickly. What is it with Baltimore and Pittsburgh and that rivalry? And do the Steelers outlast the Ravens to win the AFC North?
Well, I think the rivalry just kind of mutual respect. I mean, you never say that thinking about some of the trash talking and how hard they hit out there. But, I think these guys are such competitive dudes, and they just like to play against the best. And then, the second part of your question kind of relates to the first. Stakes are always so high. I mean, two really quality teams, each time they line up, there's something at stake. I mean, and that's that AFC North crown. I mean, I think Baltimore's going to be awfully tough this year. I haven't looked at their schedule or really kept too close of an eye on them this last couple of weeks, but a little strange they start the season off against one another.
Yeah.
Some fans like to see that happen a little later in the year, but I think it'll be a great way to start out the new year.
It's interesting. I'd really like to see both those teams get warmed up before they start beating the crap out of each other. Week one, the chances of injury greatly increase when those two teams bang heads. For sure.
I know there could be 10 guys injured after that first week, and those games are already ugly enough. It should be a slugfest.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Hey, Michael, great to catch up. And if there's any breaking news regarding the Steelers, we'd like to get back with you again. Thanks for your time, bud.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. That's Michael Bean, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, Pittsburgh Steelers, 4 wide with the Wise Guys. Will continue that coming up on Monday and every weekday leading up to the NFL season, each day at 4:40.